Well, the trade is bearish on the state of the 2024 U.S. corn and soybean crops, despite a northwestern belt that continues to suffer under the weight of excessive rainfall and flooding. Man, it's just been one right after another up there, and apparently there's more on the way. The week started with the funds continuing to add to their, short positions, but also the early week got the major grains back in the green. Mysteriously, maybe Kohli and Cavanaugh can tell us why. And that trend continued as the market reopened on Friday with a lot of green, and that was good news. And now that the June reports are behind us, it is mostly all about the weather for the next couple of months. Kohli and Cavanaugh's thoughts and insights coming up next, and they're brought to you by the Allen County Farm Bureau. And you know, your county farm bureau right now, pretty busy prepping for county fairs all over the state, celebrating the contributions that Hoosier farm families are making to providing food, fuel, and clothing to our state, the nation, and of course the world. Support your Farm Bureau with a membership. Simply go online to it, paystobeamember.org. Well, guys, I wanted to start out with the weather and, kind of by extension, crop condition ratings, because corn condition in the Western Corn Belt, David, dropped a few points, while here in the Eastern Corn Belt, we gained a few points. And I mean, that included Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. We're all doing pretty good.
Yes, we sure are. And our crops, even though some were planted later and then later and then later, it really has done well out in the West and including Wisconsin. It's too wet. There's more rain coming out there. That is a big issue that's going to be coming along because there's a cold pressure system that's over us. You know how chilly it's been the last few days.
Yeah.
So that's keeping the weather south of us. There's a big high pressure, very dense air over the Mid-South right now into almost the Gulf. That's pushing the hurricane and keeping it from going. But once it gets beyond that and the high pressure system goes deep, then barrel it is going to go up the east coast of Texas. And look where it goes, right up the Mississippi River.
And John, you mentioned that you've seen corn actually tasseling right here in our area, which, for most who got their corn in late, a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah, it is a surprise because we all know that our crops in this region in Indiana went in very late, and they're still behind in development and very short. They're doing well, but in some cases, there's corn coming out here that's only been planted about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And of course, a lot of soybeans were planted real late, and soybeans are especially small. Now, you go to the rest of the states, that's not the case. In the rest of the state, especially when you get down into southern Indiana, the crops are tasseling, and a lot of central Indiana the same way. Their crops are far ahead of ours. But I did pick up some talk about tar spot in central Indiana.
Yeah.
Not at this point. I don't think it's serious, but I haven't heard any in our territory, so I want to kind of keep an eye on that one. But the Western ratings went down, but they're still very good.
Yeah, awfully good with regard to U.S. soybean ratings as well. Better than trade expectations, holding steady at 67%. And John, again, to your point, soybeans, smallish, we'll go with that, but looking very good as we roam around the state.
Yeah, they do. When I look at the soybean crop, overall, it doesn't look as good to me as the corn crop, even though they're rated almost identical. But that's because they were planted so late, and a lot of beans have only been up for a week or two. So obviously they're small and they don't look as good. But if the weather continues favorable, they certainly will come along. But we still have to go through the key month of August. We've had pretty good rains with more in the forecast across the Midwest, but there are continue to be estimates out there that we're going to turn warm and dry again for the next 2 months. But how about our weather expert, Mr. Kohli? What does he say?
Yeah, if these cold fronts start staying up in Canada instead of coming down here, we do look to go hot and dry, but I'm not going to count on that because all the weather forecasters I've been seeing, especially, for the 1 week and 2 weeks ahead, keep forcing in colder temperatures, warmer temperatures. If we ever get these cold fronts to quit coming down and bugging us, then we're going to see hot and dry weather, but I don't think we will.
Let's talk about what's been going on in the market, because this week was just a chaotic week. I mean, whenever you take a major holiday and stick it in the middle of the week, it's going to be chaos, right? But John, the soy complex, because of soy oil, started out the week the bullish leader for the entire complex, and it seemed to continue through the whole week.
Oh, my gosh, I tell you, this is a rather incredible. It started on Monday. We have started a major bull rally in soybean oil. Now, that's, of course, has driven soybean prices higher. November soybean prices had a new contract low, then turned around and have moved higher. And the driving force has been, of all things, soybean oil, because rarely does soybean oil lead the soybean complex that they are at the moment. The reason why is apparently because of some problems with production in Indonesia, the Indonesian palm oil production. As you all know, the palm oil is the world's most used produced vegetable oil. And there's also a trade war talk with China. Now, why is that? It's because Indonesia imports a lot of Chinese goods. And like they do everywhere else, they produce things cheaper. And Indonesia's fighting back. And they said, we're going to put a tariff on your imported goods to protect our manufacturing. And China has turned around and said, if you do that, we're the largest importer of palm oil in the world, and we're going to cut off palm oil imports from Indonesia and put a tariff on those.
Trade war in the making.
That's right. When you start talking about trade wars, all of a sudden the market goes crazy. Of course, if this trade war does happen, China may have to import more soybean oil. Some of that will come from South America, of course, but some could come from the U.S. We have seen a huge bull market develop in the bean oil. In the last 4 trading days, we've gone up over 5 cents a pound, which is a huge move for soybean oil, from 44 cents to 49 cents. There's major resistance above the market at around 50 cents. But we got to watch this one, guys.
Yeah.
So we still have a lot of question marks out there about the soybeans.
Don't forget, crude oil had a low earlier in the week around 73. It's 83 now for crude oil.
Oh, yeah. Now, David, what's going on with crude oil?
If they get over 84, it's going to go 90 to 95 the next time. We're just getting really nervous all over the place, driving the crude oil higher again.
And that also tends to be friendly on the ag commodities.
Yes, very friendly, especially the oil and the beans.
Okay, let's talk about what happened with regard to export sales this week, because I think they were understandably pretty lackluster, David. But before you get into that, let me ask you a quick question, because I saw this 100,000 metric ton purchase of corn by Colombia for delivery this marketing year, but I'm just kind of puzzled because Colombia is a whole lot closer to Brazil than we are. Why are they buying from us and not Brazil?
Well, look at the political situation down there. Brazil's politics right now are kind of like going sideways. They're worried about changes in the currency value, dropping that. That would favor their sales of corn to there. But Colombia has been a consistent buyer. I've noticed them almost every week. They were the second largest buyer of U.S. corn this week. The largest buyer was unknown, 138.4. Now, the number was low overall, but the point is somebody wants our corn, and they're paying for it, especially Colombia, on a consistent basis.
What about the other, well, it's not even worth talking about the export sales. They were so bad. But one last thing with regard to the markets, John, this ethanol business, we got to ask ourselves, how important is ethanol to corn farmers? And apparently, Arlen Suderman came out with a point this week. He said the estimated corn usage for ethanol totals about 4.5 billion bushels, which is up 202 million bushels, or about 4.7% higher than last year's pace. But you're telling me you heard something that's counter to that.
Yes. Actually, it's very odd because Arlen Suderman is very highly respected. No question about that. He knows what he's talking about. He's the primary commodity analyst for StoneX. Well, I saw some other information coming from StoneX that said that the current rate of usage of ethanol, those numbers suggest that we're falling behind the USDA estimate. That we've only got 8 weeks left in the season before the corn marketing year is over. And it suggests that our current rate, we're going to fall 100 million bushels behind the USDA estimate of 5.45 billion bushels of corn used for ethanol. So I find that very confusing. Guys, we got to figure this one out.
Well, we got to keep an eye on it as well. David, one of the other things I thought was kind of interesting this week, because I think a lot of people checked out for the 4th of July holiday. They left the office early on Wednesday. They took Thursday off, and then they took Friday off, and they're probably barely getting back to consciousness at this point, much less to have seen the news that was coming out of Russia with regard to their wheat production. They raised it by 4 million tons, and I think at a time when nobody was really looking. But as bearish as that could be for wheat prices, you've got some other news about that.
Yeah, because they did have a bigger wheat crop in southern Russia than what they expected. But there's one problem. The quality is awful. In fact, they're saying the gluten doesn't match their lowest number that they allow for wheat sales for export. It's below that. So if they sell all this extra production, they're going to have to avow the gluten numbers, and that then would mean a discount for it. So here we go, cheaper wheat, and Russia's got more than expected. But remember, the quality's low.
One of the other notes that came out too, John, was Agroconsult had raised its Brazilian second corn crop production estimate by 4 million metric tons, approximately, up to 100.5, which is not as high as it was last year, but nonetheless, man,
but higher than expected.
Well, it's kind of a remarkable jump in 1 week.
It's an incredible jump. I know their harvest is going faster for the second corn crop than it usually does. They're running ahead of schedule. But, boy, how do you reconcile these numbers? We don't know what to believe anymore because we get one number one day, and then the next day or the next week, we get a different number.
Yeah. Speaking of next week, we're going to get another crop production report, USDA S&D report coming out next Friday. So make sure you're with us a week from today when we'll be talking about that. All right, John, you get the final word each week. And what do you got for us this week?
Well, just an observation about soybeans and soybean conditions. Conditions were unchanged this week from the previous week at 67% good excellent. Now, that 67% good excellent is the second highest in the past 6 years, but more incredibly, it's the fourth highest in the past 30 years.
Whoa.
Yes, that's impressive. Now, of course, are we going to maintain that? We have the crucial month of August ahead of us, so therefore the door is wide open. But just to kind of put this in perspective, if we go back to 2016, that year is when we had the record yield set for the national average yield for soybeans. Now, that was 8 years ago. That yield was 52.1 bushels. Now, that was quite a bit above trend at the time because 52 bushels is current trend. So trend back in that year was considerably lower than 52. Now, conditions in 2016, good excellent percent, never got below 70% the entire year. And at the end of the season, the conditions report, it was 74% good excellent. So kind of keep that in mind. If the soybeans stay around the 67%, even in the mid-60s to the low 60s, we will very possibly be looking at an above trend yield.
Thanks, guys. Kohli and Cavanaugh made possible each week by support from the Allen County Farm Bureau. And I know your local county farm bureaus are supporting Indiana agriculture every single day. And to keep up with that, Indiana Farm Bureau members can sign up for The Dispatch, the electronic newsletter that is sent out weekly during the legislative session and every other week the rest of the year. Topics covered in recent issues include the Farm Bill, the primaries, and updates from Farm Bureau task forces. To start getting The Dispatch, all you got to do is go online to infb.org. Just another one of the great benefits you get from your membership. Go online to itpaystobeamember.org.
Podcasts by Federated Media.